All right, guys, as we're well into the holiday season, I am joined by none other than Bill Martin, the Revolutionary Realtor with Levin Rinke. And Bill, thanks for your time today. Appreciate you.
Thank you for having me here. This is fantastic.
And, as we kind of put Thanksgiving in the rearview mirror, one of the things I wanted to point out was how thankful that I am for the first-time homebuyer clients that reach out to us for their financing needs, for their questions, putting their trust in us, putting their trust in you.
Yeah.
And, with that being said, I kind of wanted to start there. I wanted to get your approach, and I'll give you mine on how you deal with first-time home buyers and maybe some of the expectations that you try to lay out for them when they're working with you.
Great, yeah, because it is a huge honor to be chosen to represent a first-time home buyer. This is a very new and exciting experience for them, and they don't realize. It's one of those things. You don't know how much you don't know until you get into the situation. And first-time home buyers in particular, they think, all right, I qualify for X amount and I need 5% down, 10% down. They don't know, they don't necessarily know, all right, there's a difference between what you qualify for and what you can comfortably afford.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you qualify for, that's the max. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the max that most lenders feel comfortable lending to somebody.
Yeah, typically there may be a little wiggle room in there. We try not to have it to where it's extremely tight in case something happens where they need to adjust a little bit. But typically somebody wants to find out what the max is. And so, but yeah.
Yeah, and so working with them and counseling them, asking the hard questions, because a lot of people don't like to ask, how much money do you have? How comfortable? What are your life events that you do on a regular basis? What are your life events that are coming up that you want to make sure you have the money for? So it's a greater process for that, and then that's where I'd love to get my loan officers involved, because they think, all right, 10% down. If you're buying a $300,000 house, 10% is...
Well, here, and I wanted to, as you're on that note, I wanted to shoot some numbers at you really quickly. So the national average this year for purchasing existing homes was just over $400,000. So let's just use that for a baseline, right? $400,000. And conventional loans will allow you to go down to 3% down payment. So, if we're talking about 3%, that's $12,000 on a $400,000 home, right? And so people need to consider that when they're starting their process. The figures, we need to start to put real figures down so people can understand. It's not just talking with so-and-so.
That dollar amount is just a down payment. There are other costs that they need to bring to the closing table.
Absolutely.
And so you can throw out a couple of those in there.
Absolutely. So let's stick on the $400,000 loan amount, for example. And so the Florida average, since we live in the beautiful state of Florida, is roughly 3% as well. Now that can fluctuate a little bit higher, a little bit lower. It's going to be somewhere similar to that. So you're talking about, okay, now we're talking about $12,000 down payment. It'll be a little bit less than that since the loan amount's coming down from that $400,000 amount once you have the down payment. But let's just use 3%. Now we're talking about $24,000 because we have $12,000 for your down payment. We have $12,000 for your closing costs. Now, these are just estimated figures. We're going to get that narrowed down the further in the process that we go. But educating them, first-time home buyers, for example, that's the big part of the process. So kind of putting those numbers out there and in their minds from the beginning so that they're not getting to close to the end and now they're saying, well, wait a second, I don't have these funds set aside for closing. So keeping, and just a couple other things on that note, my approach on first-time home buyers is to kind of assume that they don't know anything about the process. Like, I don't want to go in there and assume that they know anything. And it's not me talking down to them. It allows me to stay focused on my approach also.
We have a kind of a step-by-step process that we have to go through, and it helps us not miss anything in the process. So we're not, like you said, we're not speaking down to the first-time home buyers. We're making sure we cover anything, because when you start assuming they know what you know, things, and then we get out of sequence in what we're doing because we're not going through all those processes.
Sure.
It's not a smooth process as we get to the finish line.
Right. And you want to keep them involved throughout the process and just kind of manage their expectations. And that's where, like, question for you was just kind of just what kind of expectations do you want to lay out for them? And that's the same kind of approach I have, is kind of keep their expectations realistic, because it's easy to fall in love with something that maybe they can't afford, or they're just under the wrong impression of going into this because their family member bought a home so long ago, and it's just there's a lot of misinformation out there, or just information that they're just not sure of, and we want to share that out.
Tapping on the family member buying long ago, the process has changed.
Oh yeah,
the process
absolutely.
changes almost annually. Sometimes a couple times in a year, things change. Policies, procedures change. Interest rates.
No, they change all the time.
I just blinked. I think that interest rates changed. That's
absolutely.
Things along that. And then, so again, going with the first time home buyer, or because first time buyer programs aren't just for people buying their first home, it's for people who haven't owned a home in 3 years.
3 years. Yep.
And so, talking about the policies that change, we like to make sure that we're talking about everything and covering everything, because they might forget, oh, well, while I'm figuring out my budget, I need to figure out insurance costs. Because homeowners insurance you can be, seen this happen, opposite sides of the street, and insurance premiums can vary
Drastically.
And so it's things that we want to make sure on the front end that we're doing, because all right, we have that $400,000 window we're working with, but that's the top end. A lot of people focus on that top end dollar amount and not so much the monthly payments, which include property taxes, which include insurance, your utilities. All these are variables that can change. We said on the opposite side of the street, but sometimes just moving 5 minutes away from your optimal destination can get you more house for less money, and maybe even a little higher quality house, along with a higher quality of life. Because at the end of the day, we don't want to be house poor. We want to come home. We want to love our house, but we don't want to be chained to our house.
Right.
And that's, for me, for me to be able to sleep at night when I'm working with new home buyer, somebody who's on their 10th home, at the end of the day, I want them to be able to say, I'm glad that Bill helped us get into this house, rather than why did Bill talk us into buying this expensive house.
Yeah, and a key question to look at on the application is, on first-time home buyers, is what their rent payment is. Like, are they currently paying rent, and are they comfortable with that fee, like with that expense, rather?
Correct.
All right. So going back to your point, you want to make sure that it's not just they're maxing out their budget, but kind of find that comfort zone with them, and that's had through conversation. So it's very important.